Welcome to the January 8th, 2013 Shakopee City Council meeting, the first one of the year. Happy New Year, everyone. Kim, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Sherman?
Here.
Councilor Lehman?
Here.
Councilor Clay?
Here.
Councilor Whiting?
Here.
Mayor Tapke?
Here. All stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections? Mr. McNeil.
Mr. Mayor, we have a couple. First, 4A1 is the discussion of Dakota Crossings plat, and at the request of the developer, this is again requested to be withdrawn from tonight's meeting, and that'll be brought back. We also have a request to add an item, which I would propose to be 12A. We have a purchase offer on the downtown fire station. We'd like to discuss that with you. That will be done in closed session. Finally, item 10E1 is a discussion of the 2013 park dedication fees, and we would propose to have that discussed concurrently with item 6B, which is the 2013 fee schedule.
All right, with those addition and those amendments there, anything else from council? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Councilor Whiting, sorry.
I'll move to approve the agenda as presented and modified. Second.
Second by Councilor Clay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 4, consent business. Any items we need to remove from consent besides 4A1? Mr. McNeil?
Nothing from staff.
All right. Mr. Lehman?
6B, is that on consent?
6B is not consent, that's
Okay.
public hearing.
Anything else? Councilor Whiting?
I'll move to adopt the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Sherman. Mr. McNeil, could you please read the consent agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4A1 was the item that was deferred. 4B1 declares 3 forfeited vehicles held by the Shakopee Police Department to be surplus property and authorizes proper disposal or sale of these vehicles. 4C1 authorizes the appropriate city officials to execute an amendment to the extension agreement with WSB and Associates for Valley View Road consulting improvements at a cost of $14,500. 4C2 declares 2 vehicles held by the Public Works Department to be surplus property and authorizes the sale of these vehicles to Boyer International for a total of $50,000. 4C3 authorizes utilization of repurchase agreements for 1 Caterpillar skid steer loader from Ziegler Incorporated for $8,229.38 and 1 Bobcat skid steer loader from Lano Equipment for $5,031, both for the Public Works Department. 4D1 approves the completion of the 6-month promotional probationary period of Amberly Cortez and grants her full-time regular status as a police records technician in the Shakopee Police Department. 4D2 authorizes the appropriate city officials to enter into a 3-year professional services agreement with Financial Concepts, Inc. for insurance consulting services for an annual amount of $21,000. 4D3 approves the job description and authorizes staff to advertise for a human resources specialist position. 4D4 adopts resolution number 7270, a resolution adopting a personnel handbook revision for paid on-call firefighters. 4D5 authorizes the promotion of Gene Link to police record specialist effective January 14, 2013. 4F1 approves the payment of bills and electronic transfers in the amount of $1,385,820.67. 4F2 approves the minutes of the City Council meeting of December 18, 2012. 4F3 adopts the 2013 City Council meeting policies and procedures. 4F4 authorizes the designation of the Shakopee Valley News as the official newspaper for the City of Shakopee for 2013. And 4F5 authorizes applications of and grants massage therapy business licenses and massage therapist licenses to Rochelle Bauman and Jennifer Friesen, and approves the application of and grants a massage therapist license to Aaron McLumphrey.
Very well done. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 5, recognition of involved citizens by City Council. Anyone out there to discuss an item that's not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we will move on to public hearings. I entertain a motion to reopen the public hearing for vacation of public right-of-way for Jefferson Street.
So moved.
Counselor Sherman, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Clay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 6A.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the audience. As you noted, this is request for a vacation of a portion of street right-of-way, specifically a portion of Jefferson. The property is located at the intersection of Third Avenue West. This is County Road 69. You can see the railroad bridge in that location. This section of Jefferson has never been improved. It functioned primarily as driveway access to the applicant's building. And as you can see from the report, Planning Commission reviewed this and they did recommend vacation of the street right-of-way on the conditions that a drainage and utility easement be retained. On the north, that would be 10 feet wide to accommodate sanitary sewer, which is in that location, and ranging from 10 to 20 feet wide as described by our engineering staff along the easternmost property for storm sewer that is existing in that location. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Mr. Clay, sorry,
Thank you.
trying to catch back up.
We have contacted Rar Malting to see if they're interested in half of that easement or half of that right-of-way.
We have not specifically contacted them to see if they're interested in part of that street as it's vacated. I'm not sure that they would qualify to acquire it except by negotiation. My understanding is that the applicant has talked with RAR, and of course we did provide them as an adjoining property owner with notice of the proposed vacation. They didn't come forward and express any interest.
So they haven't noticed.
Pardon?
We have sent them a notice
We
of it.
did send them a notice, correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone from the public here to speak about this item this evening?
City Council, my name is Brian Varland.
Come on up.
Members of the council, my name is Brian Varland.
Go ahead and, sorry, as I'm going to make you start a third time again here. Sign in there on the sign-in sheet. And then give us your name and address, please. Now you're ready to go.
Thank you. Members of the council, my name is Brian Varland. I'm here on behalf of the applicant Miller Property Holdings. With me is Dave Miller from Miller Property Holdings. We are here to answer any questions the council might have about this application. As I think the case was laid out pretty well as to the nature of what we're looking to do here, I have reached out to Rar Malting and discussed this matter with them, and they did not make any objection to this process, and they do have the understanding that should the council agree to allow the vacation to go forward, that title to the underlying property would be entirely held by Miller Property Holdings. And I'm open for any questions the council might have.
Anything we have? Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Councilor Lehman,
Motion to close public hearing.
do we have a second? Second by Councilor Whiting. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Any further questions? Sorry, I'm trying to get it in the new place. Councilor Clay.
Mayor, I'll move to approve Resolution 7266, a resolution approving the vacation of public right-of-way adjacent to 1301 3rd Avenue West, which is Jefferson Street, located north of 3rd Avenue west and south of Second Avenue West, and move its adoption.
Counselor Lehman?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much for being here. Item number 6B, 2013 fee schedule. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Counselor Clay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Counselor Sherman, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Ms. Linehan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and viewing public. Before you this evening, get this. Okay, there we got her. Before you this evening is the item that annually appears before the council, which is the review and approval of the 2013 fee schedule for the city of Shakopee. This appears before you after the departments of the city have reviewed the existing fee schedule and provided recommendations, or in the case of the Park and Recreation, board and commissions have reviewed these and they are then presented to the council for approval. What is unique tonight is another item on the agenda, item 10E1, involves discussion of the park dedication fees. This has been a process that began back a few meetings ago when council requested some additional review and information relating to park dedication fees. Typically, as a council, you open the public hearing, discuss any questions on the fees, and then approve the fees that are presented for the upcoming year. In tonight's session, you will also hear from Ms. Polly, who will give you an update on information she has garnered related to the dedication fees based on the discussion that was recently held regarding request for a reduction or a review of these fees. What I'd like to do first is go through with you the small amount of changes that we are presenting this evening for the 2013 fees. These will then be presented to you for approval after discussion on the park dedication fees so that the fee schedule in whole can be approved. As you recall, several meetings ago, in I believe it was September, the massage license fees were approved by council. They did not appear on the 2012 fees. They've been brought forward into the 2013 fees. There's under the building inspection area, there are fence permits that have been increased from 25 to 40. There is also a sanitary sewer service availability charge, or SAC charge, that is related to some direction and decisions made by the Met Council. Mr. Loney is available, who has attended many of the meetings related to the fees that are charged. That will increase from the 2012 rate of $23.65 to the 2013 rate of $24.35 per unit. Under the planning area, there is a deletion of a fee. Again, it's a fee that's somewhat non-existent due to technology changes. There were a couple of changes under the trunk stormwater charges and several changes under the sanitary sewer charges that are listed, excuse me here, as can be seen on this chart. Small, not terribly significant changes because, as you also recall earlier this year, staff has brought forward to you a proposal for a fee study that we are taking on during 2013 that will review in great detail the majority of the fees that the city is currently charging, assessing and updating and determining if the fees are accurate, if they need to be adjusted, and based on some very solid criteria. So you will see additional fee schedule changes coming forward during 2013. At this time, I'd be glad to answer any questions, or I will turn it over to Ms. Polly, who can bring forward her presentation on the park dedication fees.
Do we have any questions? Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, on, well, let's see, page 15 of the document that we received in our packet for 6B, under permits to work and public right-of-way fees, item H, number 2, excavation permit fee, A, B, and C, whole $225, proposed $225, And then the new document on the table is hole 325, proposed 350. So,
Bruce, would you like to address that?
Okay, this is on the excavation permit fee, the emergency hole.
Page 13.
page 13 of the document in the packet, this was on the table tonight.
Well, actually, I think when you're looking at the emergency hole, on page 13, it shows 350 to 350.
Okay,
Is that what you're looking at? And then we actually double-checked, and the 2012 rate was actually 325. So there was somewhat of a typo.
so we're basically missing the standard hole, not the emergency hole.
That's the emergency hole.
Right, but it's not listed on the new document. Just a standard hole at 225. It's on the old document.
I got it on mine.
I think this is just showing the summary
Right,
of
No, I've got it.
changes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
So that
since
didn't change at all.
so it's not.
The
here,
standard
we
hole
check-
stayed the same.
correct. And the final fee schedule document will reflect that.
You're on the front. If you go back to page 13 here, it's in here.
Yeah, it's on this one, but if this is the
Yeah.
one that's on the table, it's not in this one, so I was wondering, are we dropping it, or is it not in here because we didn't change it at all?
Got it. I see what you're saying. Yeah, but if you go all the way to the back, it's there.
Read what I got. And then,
Okay.
second question is, justification for almost a doubling of a fence permit.
The fence permit. Mr. Leek, would you like to discuss that?
Yes, members of the council, I can. The current fee is $25 and the proposed fee is $40. And so you are correct, it almost represents a doubling. However, it is touched by inspections, planning, and engineering staff. And so even at $40, we do not recoup the cost of the review. It's a pretty nominal fee compared to the other fees that we charge for relatively minor permits in the inspection area.
Is
Mr. Lehman?
Is there a permit required for a fence under 6 feet on private property when it's not on easement or right away?
There are a few exceptions where permits are not required, and as I recall the ordinance, they relate primarily to garden fences, which are lower fences. Any fence of 6 feet or less that is along a property perimeter or within a property would require a permit. And the reason for that, as you'll recall, is to review them to make sure that there are not utilities in the easements that might be affected by the placement of a fence.
But if the fence isn't in the easement, then it's on the private property, there should be no,
A permit is still required under Chapter 4.
but you wouldn't be checking for utilities because then the
Materials.
utilities would be encroaching on private property.
You might be checking, however, for materials and so on. But the point is, you wouldn't know until you checked whether or not there was a sanitary sewer or a storm sewer line in that area, or that might be affected if it's right up to the easement. I don't know if you have any
No,
additional
that's,
comment.
that's true. I mean, we also look at, if there's usually easements in almost every lot, there's easements around the perimeter. Whether or not we have a utility in there is another thing, but we also would look at the material of the fence, make sure it meets the zoning. And also then we look at, for the final inspection, make sure it's put in the right place. So the $40, as Michael mentioned, is still not even close to what we spend as far as staff time. But we felt it is appropriate to raise it at this time. But if council views it differently, I mean, it would just be a bigger cost that we don't recoup.
Any other questions? Councilor Whiting?
Julie, you took a look, we'd talked about this in the past, and you were looking at, a lot of our fees don't meet the costs that we're putting into it, like we talked about here. Now, some of this will be adjusted from this fee schedule survey.
Right.
Is this moving in the direction that you've done, you've looked at some of these fees and you feel that these are gonna be adjusted to fit our cost needs?
Correct. I think one of the most difficult things for individuals who come in with a permit application and then receive a billing for the charges is can they be really sure that what they are being billed for reflects back to actual cost? It has been some time since that has been reviewed, studied, and really applied to actual time spent. Who are the personnel touching all these different permits? What is the impact and the amount of time versus what it may have been 5 years ago? What are the requests of the applicants, and how has that changed how we apply a charge to this? And it's truly time to get in and take a look at that very diligently across the board to every permit area.
So this has been an internal study that you've done with the different,
Actually, what this is there was a study that had been done many years ago that involved, first off, positions that have changed significantly here in the city. We've done a lot of restructuring, we've done a lot of reassignment of work detail, and there's also a flow of the paperwork based on when someone brings in a permit request. There are now a lot of situations that are very unique, very unusual, take a lot of different time from the skilled staff, whether it be planning, inspections, engineering, public works. It's one of those learn as you go kind of criteria. We're finding that a lot of the workflow that may have existed several years ago, either changes in technology, changes in practices, new mandates, would require a different way of addressing the permit request, and then that also changes what is the cost of creating the documents and the follow-up data that you need to justify the cost of the permit. So it does require the work with an outside group, Springstead, who is working with us on this, and we're developing the model to determine what's the cost for each position in the city, and then the work papers as to what does that, or what are the actual positions that are working on each task, and then applying that based on amount of time spent, review, etc.
thank you.
Mr. Leek?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'd add a note to that in preparation for Ms. Linehan bringing to you the proposal to do a new study related to fees. She and I did take a look at, in 2012, what our fee intake was for a variety of permit activities and what the expenses were that were reported.
Correct.
And I think it's important to at least preview that very likely you will have a decision point as it relates to especially some of the inspection permits and perhaps some of the planning permits.
Right.
Because it's highly unlikely, in my view, that you will want to raise them as they relate to single-family property owners in particular to a level that will fully collect for what the expenditure is. So just be aware as that comes forward that that will be a policy discussion that I think we expect you'll have to have with respect to some of those permits.
Councilor Lehman?
Well, let me see if I can understand this fully and ask if there's been any thought put into this fee study process relating to, let me give you a hypothetical. Somebody comes in for a permit to replace the windows, doors, and siding. They pay the permit fee, but have we thought about the improvement to the property, how that benefits the city tax capacity, and the increased value and taxes that we collect for that improvement?
The only way, if I can address that in pieces, Councilmember Lehman, the only way the city increases what they collect in tax dollars is if the city raises the levy. Someone can have a significant increase on their property. That doesn't mean the city gets additional taxes. As you recall, when we've talked a lot of the budget discussions, when you keep the levy flat, there's no additional levy dollars collected. When people have increased values, that doesn't mean that the city is going to see an increased tax collection. The only way the city sees an increased tax collection is in a levy increase.
If the levy is flat
Mhm.
at a set rate, the amount on this house at 100,000 is less than this house at 200,000.
Correct, because it's at a different value.
If this house is 100,000 and they make these improvements and it's now worth 200,000,
Mhm.
they're going to pay more tax even though the rate is the same because the value of the property is higher.
They will have a value based on their assessed value. But the city as a whole does not collect. It's spread over, it's like the balloon. One part goes down, one part goes up.
But the city ultimately gets a larger tax capacity because of that improvement on that property.
They get a larger tax capacity, which simply would change the tax rate. It wouldn't change the amount of tax collected.
So we wouldn't get any more taxes unless we levied more money.
Correct.
The person who added the $100,000 onto their home would pay more taxes, but then theoretically, all the other residents in the city would pay just a little bit less because of the added value they put to their
Well,
home.
but to cut to the chase, it's in the city's best interest to have their tax capacity increase, correct?
Oh, without a doubt. I've not ever seen a situation where tax capacity increases have been a negative
And when
impact.
properties improve themselves and raise their value, that increases the city's tax capacity.
Correct.
The second part of this thought process is, at the beginning of 2013, we passed end of 2012, we passed a budget that fully funds this department, or all of our departments. So, to collect money to pay for the services from a department that have already been collected in a tax process to fully fund that department, is now we're collecting the fees to offset that funding that we've already collected. So where does the funding that we pre-collected for that funding of that department then go?
I think there's two issues here. When you say the budget fully funds these departments, that's not truly accurate. If you were to take, here's the revenues, as Mr. Leek had stated, here's the revenues for when you're working on a inspection of a home or a commercial. Here's what we collect in the permit fee. They don't match right now. There's a big disparity.
But in his budget, he says, I'm gonna get this much revenue based on past calculations from.
From the
permits and
general
fees.
overall taxpayer base. What
Right.
we're saying here is the system that's in place for inspection services, for the fees, is the actual individual benefiting from the service pays for the cost of the service. That's the whole general idea when we do these kind of fee studies is the individual benefiting from the service, paying for the cost of the service, or is the general tax base subsidizing that?
Well, let me try this one last way.
Hold on a sec. So what you're trying to say is that we should wait and we'll put these into effect for 2014 and not 2013 because 2013 is already funded.
I'm just trying to
Which
understand.
you
You're just
could.
having a discussion.
Yeah.
It's a thought
Right.
process.
Yeah, and you could defer as we go through this fee study, any of these fees till whatever time you wish. Just understanding at this point, what you're collecting in revenue is much lower than what the cost of your service is.
I suspect in that budget item that when we show revenue, we're showing a portion of that revenue coming from permits, and we're using 2013 numbers based on what we had in 2012 and what we're anticipating for 2013. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Leek, or not?
I think that's generally a correct statement, and to carry it a little further, because of my simple mind, I think the thing that your question doesn't quite touch on is that that budget posits that there will be a revenue based on what we've taken a look at that funds a portion of inspection services, planning, or engineering services, and only that portion which is not funded by those fees are fully funded by the general tax levy. So, Ms. Linehan will correct me if I'm wrong, if you were to say, let's pay for it all with general tax levy and let's ignore fees for the moment, you would have to increase that levy pretty substantially to offset the revenues that we collect for planning, for inspections, for engineering services to fully fund them. In other words, they are not fully funded
Correct.
by the general levy. They are only partially funded, in a majority funded
Correct.
by the general levy, but partially funded by the fees for service, which state statute says certainly a city can collect, but it has to be a rational relationship between the service provided and the cost that's charged.
Correct. Okay, all right.
Thank you. Councilor Whiting.
Any
Oh,
other?
Mr. Leek just answered my question, Mr. Mayor, my comment anyway, that when we did the budgeting process, part of the revenue stream was from fees, so.
Correct.
And one other question, Ms. Linehan. Could you give, so the fee study will be completed,
We're
process
doing
is
it
when?
incrementally. We're gonna be starting with inspections and planning, because those are areas of, I think, the fee study that will take probably the most intense work and the most amount of review, just from the complexity of what we're dealing with and the different parties that you're dealing with who come in for those services. After that, we'll be dealing with the clerk and administration. After that, we'll be looking at engineering and utilities, and then we'll go into recreation. So we're breaking it up into components that we'll be working through 2013.
And that's still gonna be on the same budget that we talked about earlier?
Yes.
Councilor Lehman?
So when we put the 2013 budget together in December and adopted it, did it anticipate these increases, or was it based on no increase?
It was based on a slight increase because we knew we were not going to have the numbers in place nor the discussions with council by 1/1. So we've modified some of the 2013 numbers. The area that would probably see the result the most quickly would be planning and inspections. One that will see the least results would be recreation. They're in the last group. So there is a slight amount, but not significant. If we were to, and again, as we go into this discussion and talk about the fees, as we bring forward the recommendations, we'll also talk about what we think this would do to the revenues projections.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move to Jamie? Ms. Polly?
Okay. Those are.
Oh, it's right here, never mind. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm covering the Parks and Recreation fees first before I get into the park dedication fees, in case you have any questions, just to explain a little bit more. I did review these fee changes with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board in October. Many of these changes, and especially the 3% increase with the memberships, was something that I did work into my budget when working for 2013, because I typically take this to the park board October, September time for them to look at, so that we're prepared to move forward when we do our winter brochure is our biggest thing that comes out. So that's what we look at. The first item, just going through this real briefly, I won't get into a lot of detail except for the couple of major changes that we have, but the first item is the membership and admissions. As council may recall, when we were doing our budget process earlier this year, the council had talked about at one meeting doing an increase to, or anticipating an increase in revenue from Parks and Recreation because of an increase in fees that we would charge for 2013, and that was based on the actual 2010 study done by our consultants when we were looking at our referendum and where we were at with our fees, and they had recommended an incremental increase every year. We did an incremental increase in 2010. We did not in 2011, but we are bringing that back per council direction and per their recommendation for 2013. I'm sorry, we did it for 2011, we did not do it for 2012, but we are doing it for 2013. So this shows a 3% increase for our membership fees, both for the community center and, as you'll see on the last page, for our Sand Venture Aquatic Park as well. Then we get down to our rentals, our room rentals, and our facility rentals. The first thing I will tackle that the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board discussed was the use of our gym. We've had some different requests this year that have caused us to look at our gym fees a little bit different, and they coincide too with our civic definition of a local civic group, which I'll talk about in just a second. But we, over many, many years, have always charged the same rental rate for our gymnasiums as we have for the Rotary Room and the studio that we have meetings in. This is becoming more and more of a use that people want to rent out the gym for larger groups, for volleyball, for basketball, special events, so forth. So in looking at our demand for our gym, one of the major things that a person buys a membership for at the community center has to do with the fact that it covers open gym. And so our open gym is a very sought after time that we have at the community center. When I first started in 2007, there was always a gym open every single night, every hour that the community center was open. With the demand of wanting to increase programming, with the demand of rentals, with the demand of just trying to do other things in the community center to get the community center more used, we changed that to having it available for open gym Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays, and then Saturdays and Sundays would always have a gym open. I'm sorry, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and Saturdays having a gym open, and then our staff was directed to start programming the gym on Mondays, Thursdays, and then Saturday mornings for programming space, because we needed to increase our programming as well, and we're just limited on the community center space. So as we see it, the gym is very a tight facility that we have to program creatively. But we also saw that it's a bigger area, it can accommodate more people, and it sometimes has to do with a little bit more supervision. So the park board is recommending that the gym rate be increased. The room rates are being increased from $30 to $40 an hour, and that is doing away with the non-resident resident fee, because we changed this last year for 2012 with our park rentals, that many non-residents find a resident anyway, and then they rent the facility. This is just much easier for staff to verify we don't have to verify their residency. So we're doing away with the non-resident fee for room rentals, and we're changing that from 30 to 40, but then they're recommending having the gym separate as a $50 per hour rental. No resident, non-resident as well. So it would be $40 for a meeting room, $50 for the gymnasium. So then with the facility space, as I mentioned before, I believe about 3 or 4 years ago, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board set a fee for our local civic groups at $10 an hour. That was set because we had been giving out a lot of free space. I believe it was 2010, actually. It came out of that same study for a referendum. We've been getting out a lot of free space to many, many groups, nonprofit and local civic groups in the community center. It was suggested just to do a minimum fee, because most of these groups do give back to the community and to the community center. We have the Rotary area, we have the Lions Den. So the groups have been very, very supportive of our programs and our facilities. But this last year it used to be that nonprofit and civic organizations got the room for $10 per hour. We're raising that to $15 per hour to recoup more of the costs on that, because and 15, like Michael and Bruce said, for a fence permit, $15 does not even cover the staff time to do a facility rental permit with the permitting and the follow-up and the facility setup that we have. So it's still a minimum fee for our civic groups. But when we had nonprofit in that definition, then we've come into where nonprofits that are just statewide or not local are starting to ask to use our facility for that same rate, and they don't have the connection to Shakopee that our local civic groups are. So I will take suggestions from the council, but the park board came up with this new definition to try to define it better, to really focus on local Shakopee groups and give them that benefit of our facility space because of what they do for our community. So we changed the definition to Shakopee civic groups are defined as city of Shakopee groups that are city recognized service groups. Says a lot of groups in there, and Julie and I have looked, and she has called a number of places to see if there was any, I guess, right, for local civic groups, and we have not found any, so this is what we're trying. Really, we want to point it to what we know are the groups that we recognize: the Lions, the Rotaries, the JCs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, 4-H. I know there's a few others that we're probably missing. What this doesn't cover, and we have had some calls on it, is like our couple local AA groups meet at the community center. And because they were nonprofit, they were given that nonprofit rate before. They do not fall under this definition that we have set here. So now they would go to the full rate or have to go elsewhere per this definition because of how they're not considered a local civic organization that really gives back to the community as recognized. So there's a gray area, and that's where we'll take suggestions from the council on that as to what you want to do. Many cities do not offer a discount to groups. Some have certain groups that they offer free rooms for, and they have those well defined that only if you're Lions, JC's, Rotary, you get it for free. Like I said, other communities charge a flat rate for everybody, any group that comes in. What we don't charge a group for is when we do a joint project. So when we'll do their Easter egg hunt with the JCs, and they do it with us, and we use the gym and the Rotary room, we don't charge them a fee because it's our program as well. So that's the local civic groups have defined it there, and we've also defined it under the youth building because that's another facility that is used in that terms. As you can see before, it used to be defined as groups that are 501c3 nonprofit groups and or city recognized service groups. So that's where we got into that issue. And this does not pertain, these local civic groups would not be getting the discount for the gym because of the demand for the gym at this time. We haven't had a lot of those requests otherwise. Then we have a 3% in our recreation program fees, just like our membership fees. So this will be, our staff works on the cost that it costs to have a program with supplies, instructors, and then they add that 3% increase onto that. We just added some terminology to the youth associations. This is per their agreement, so it's not anything new. We just put it into our fee schedule. Park facilities, we did add some tournament fees. As you'll see, the biggest thing down here for park facilities that we changed was this year we're going with 2 different fees. With the park board recommended that we have an open picnic shelter fee, and that would be for your Lions Memorial Park. That's just the 4 posts or 6 posts in the roof. And then we have an enclosed picnic shelter fee because it's more maintenance, upkeep for those facilities. And those would be Green Meadows, Hiawatha Homes, Scenic Heights, and Westminster. So those are the ones where you get an enclosed space as well as the open space. You get restrooms connected right to the building. There's more maintenance that goes into those facilities as well. Those facilities can also be rented year-round, except for the time when we're open for ice skating, because then it's used as a warming house. But up to open skate and after, and the rest of the summer they'd be available. And then we have outdoor turf facility with lights, and then outdoor non-turf facilities. This is to do the difference between the wear and tear that we have on our turf facilities, such as our soccer, lacrosse, football fields, versus our softball and baseball fields. It's a lot more maintenance actually for the turf. So, and those are in higher demand. They're used extensively. So that's why there is an increased cost or a different cost for those facilities versus our baseball and softball fields. I already went over that one. And then the other changes basically is we did on a special event tournament fees. These are fees that we've already always had set with the city. They're on our special permit for any group that comes in and has a tournament, particularly at like Tapa Park. It's on their agreement that they signed. We've just never had it in the fee schedule, so we're now adding it to the fee schedule. And it's really basically for extra time that our staff is required to go out to these facilities for these type of events. And then we have the civic group for the youth building. And before I get into park dedication, we just have the membership passes of the 3%. Is there any questions on Parks and Recreation fees?
Councilor Lehman.
Just a couple. The civic groups definition, could we insert maybe located and operated within Shakopee?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would kind of cover our local civic groups. Still recognized, I guess, as city service groups, but have them located and operated within the city.
Okay.
And then the open public shelters and enclosed picnic shelters. Are these, the open is 65 and the enclosed is 85? Where does that put us compared to last year or 2011?
They were all 65 last year.
Okay.
So the open airs don't change.
Okay, so the ones that go up are the enclosed ones, which are now going to the standard format with building, with the restrooms, with the extended roof picnic area
Yes.
type thing?
Yes.
Okay, and did I have one more? Oh, my other one was in the park dedication fees all the way down.
Okay. Councilor Whiting.
Again, on the civic groups definition, are we gonna have like a recognized list that we're gonna go by? Since it says city recognized, and then it also says service groups. where some groups aren't service groups, or maybe not considered service groups, such as the Heritage Society, the Senior Club, and Derby Days. Would those, in your mind, be under this list?
The seniors and the Heritage, yes. Derby Days, yes, I guess we would.
Well, that's where
Yeah,
we're opening
that one is it's a private group, but we have staff on that committee, I guess. So we have always considered them as part of this. I guess I would consider them a local civic group. I don't know if any of the other board members want to comment on that.
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, when I was commenting about my thinking we should put it on as civic groups that are located and operated within the city. If they're located here and operating here as Derby Days is and Heritages and other groups, they obviously have an impact to the community.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my rational basis to that. I mean, it's a lot different from somebody coming from outside, coming in, wanting to use our facilities, and then leaving and taking whatever they're doing with them. However, if they wanted to come in from the outside and do something for the community, they could do that through another organization. Let's say they're working with the police department to do some program that the police department picks up on. Night to Unite would be an example. That's an outside facility, but it's really working through our internal organization, and it becomes a internal Shakopee or thing.
So where do groups like AA fall in your range there?
Well, if they're coming from the outside and they want to be community focused, I would suggest that they partnership with a group in the city, whether it's health related from over drinking and it's through the hospital, or if it's law enforcement through the police department or something like that, to tag along on an existing group under their umbrella. That's my thought process. But it would have to be something that group then would have to support, recognize, and agree to.
Right. What we're talking about though is this Shakopee group. That's Whiting. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Jim.
That opens up a little more concern for me, as you could really have a slippery slope if you have another group come in under another group's name. As long as they approve it, it could really get right back to where the problem lied and the issues were. I'm not sure how we get that terminology correct, but that does open it up a little too much.
Councilor Sherman has an idea.
Well, that's where it seems that maybe we should just have a list, because it seems that we have identified the groups, and establishing a list that we then approve in order to use the facilities at that rate seems like maybe the best way to go. And if a new one comes up that we're not aware of at this point in time, then we reassess that list at different points in time. Maybe it's twice a year, to make sure that we review it appropriately.
Who approves the list?
I would assume it would be the Parks and Recreation staff.
We'll sit down and kind of coordinate the groups that we work with or we see funding or, different activities. We can put them together with them.
Yeah, I mean, if we know the past history of who's used the facility and who's been identified, then maybe we should just start there. And if someone else comes up, then that's up for discussion. The other thing is then the item right underneath that says for-profit groups per hour, we'd probably want to change that, the way that we state that, because technically it may not be a for-profit group. It might be a non-profit group that doesn't fall under the,
Outside nonprofit.
that doesn't fall under the
All other.
definition, right? It'd be all other groups,
Well,
essentially.
actually, the all other groups is the group rental right here is $40. This for-profit is actually meant to be
Got it.
someone that's renting the facility and charging a fee to get in, so they're making
Sure.
money off of our rental. So
That
I
makes
can,
sense now.
yeah, that's the rent, that's the rate we use for that type of thing. Even if it's a nonprofit group that's charging admission and wants to gain revenue off our facility, then they would
Yeah.
be charged that rate.
So like if, I don't know, just as an example, like if someone with Pampered Chef wanted to use the room at the community center, that would be their rate.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
got it.
Yeah, when we looked at, we had put in the word service groups because of that slippery slope of, who is a city organized group and who is a service group that gives back to the city. And the two groups that I can think of off the top of the head that are affected by this, that to the park board's definition wouldn't fall under this, would be the AA, which we just mentioned, and then homeowners associations had gotten that reduced rate before too. And they do operate within the city for their neighborhood, but they're not technically a service group, and that's where we came up with that language. So those are kind of the two groups I can think of off the top of my head that is questionable.
Councilor Sherman.
And then, so would we state that, excuse me, in the same way under the youth building?
Yes.
So we just duplicate the way that we state that?
So what exactly did we end up with there?
Well, we added the groups located and operated within the city of Shakopee.
And then do we want to come up
And
with a
then,
list?
yeah, we can do groups
So-
consisting of.
Oh, so we're keeping that portion of it, then adding a list onto it? Is that what you said?
That was our
Yep.
understanding if there
Yep.
was a consensus of council.
Is that the easiest way to work it for you, Jamie?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's why I started to list them there, so we had a clear idea of who we for sure know we're talking about.
Got it.
Um,
And I have no problem with giving you the power as to who is on and off that list.
That's fine.
That's,
It's just hard for me to, like with the groups, the two groups that I just mentioned, it's hard for me to explain to them, you know, why they don't fall within that group anymore.
right.
So,
But if they want to appeal it or whatever, they can bring it to us. And-
Okay.
Well,
Someone's got to say no.
yeah, if, how,
Well, I mean, I think the service portion is the way you
it's
explain
clear
it.
if it's not a service, yeah.
Well, if they're not located here and operating here, they're clearly outside of the boundaries of what we're looking for community focused,
Right.
you know.
Yep.
It's pretty clear, I think, and pretty easy.
Yep.
And then you could nitpick further down, even if they're located here, if they're not supplying a recognized community service to the whole community, then, you know, that wouldn't qualify them to be on the list, I guess.
All right.
Well,
Councilor Whiting.
That's with the senior club, that they're not, I mean, they're not going out doing service projects that, well, maybe they are, but I'm not, you know, let's use them as an example. So that's why I like those other three that I mentioned on that list, and I don't know if there's any others, but, when that was
They're
the,
located here and they're operating here.
right, but then like the AA groups could, we're just trying to eliminate some of the argument that she's gonna face when some of these groups wanna get in at the lower rate.
Diversity Alliance needs to be on there as well.
I would think the Diversity Alliance also, yep,
What did
Shakopee
you-
Diversity Alliance.
Diversity Alliance?
Yeah, 'cause
Oh,
they're-
Diversity
we're
Alliance.
trying to make a better community, and, but so is AA, so,
Have fun with that, Jamie.
Thanks. Thanks for the direction.
No, how else can we help
Yeah.
clear it up? I mean, are we okay?
Yeah, I'll start and
Take a
well,
shot.
Julie and I will work on it together and I can bring it forward too even in your activity packet for you to comment on if there's anything that you think we've missed.
All right, perfect. I have a couple questions. One, it came up this past summer, how do we handle variances to the fee schedule? We had opportunity for a really big softball tournament to come through, which would have gone more toward our economic development goals than toward our park and rec goals. But how do we handle those kinds of things that come through that they wanted to, as far as I understand, they wanted to have the tournament in Shakopee. It was too much to hold it here. Our fees are what they are. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But there are other cities that bid on having these types of tournaments come, which would have brought thousands of people into the city and those types of things. How do we handle variances to fee schedule? Can we have variances to fee schedule? How does that work?
I think, Mr. Mayor, typically what we have done, with exactly that same situation, what we have done, and like with the state baseball tournament that we've had in the past, is we've gotten a proposal from the group that wants to come in, and we've gone to the park board first to ask for either waiving of fees or reduction of fees, and then it's recommended to council. I know with this particular situation, there wasn't a proposal that actually came in. It was talked about, we gave them our fees up front, but they didn't come back with that request for any reductions, so we never brought it forward
Okay.
to any group. But that would be my suggestion to a group that calls me if they want to make any changes to it, or, you know, then we as staff could either support it or not support it, or at least say what our costs are associated with that event and what we think we should be to cover that. But I would say they would make that proposal to the park board and then a recommendation.
Perfect. Councilor Lehman.
I would be opposed to putting anything in writing saying that we will reduce fees at our own whim.
I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking how it is handled, because things need to have a process.
The city doesn't grant variances.
Sure.
It's black and white.
Yeah, good luck with that. All right, and then my second question was the community center membership.
Yep.
Are those still extremely low compared to the private market, or where are we at on those comparison wise?
They're still very low compared to the private market.
Is 3% enough of a bump, or is that what all we feel we can handle? Because I would feel we could handle a 5 to 10% increase very easily because those are so low.
Okay. Julie says that's going to be a big part of our Springstead study as well. So we did do 5 in 2011 for those fees, and it was quite a bump, and then we didn't last year, and now doing it again. I mean, you can see it's only a few dollars here, so I think that our members could handle it, but at the same time, I'd hate to raise it too quickly, where if we follow what was recommended to us in 2010, and then what we'll find out with the fee study, maybe it is that every year it has to be increased by a certain amount.
Because wasn't that what the recommendation was in 2010, was 5% a year for 5 years?
It didn't have a definition of how
Oh.
many years. It just said keep raising them.
All right, so why did we go 3 instead of 5?
By my recommendation to the park board.
Okay. Got it. I would be very willing to have that at the 5% that was recommended by the study, because they are so low, especially the family membership compared to anywhere else you're going to go. And I think that our membership fees, they don't have to be at market rate, but they need to be closer to market rate than we currently are. Councilor Lehman.
What kind of time frame do we have between, if we raise it to 5, or recommend tonight 5%, and the Springstead study?
We've projected that we'll be getting into the rec area probably late spring. So if you were gonna put this in place, what kind of, I guess my question, Mr. Mayor, would be, when would you like to see an increase go into effect if it was to change from here? Would you like to make it like within 30 days, 60 days,
I would say
immediately?
if we're having the fee
Retroactively.
study.
Yeah.
Yeah, retroactively. If we're having the fee study, I wouldn't raise it now and then raise it again
Yeah.
in a couple months. I would just keep it the same now and then have the fee study go through and say where we're supposed to be. Because I don't think it makes sense to raise it twice within a couple months if that is the recommendation.
Right, and it is published. These higher fees are published right now with our winter brochure.
Oh, okay.
With a 3% increase, so that's what we're charging as of January 1st for any new members. I would, if any recommendation changes go in, I would probably recommend that with the summer brochure or the fall to tie in with, we can do that,
I
but
shall stop talking.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Sherman.
I was just gonna say the fall is kind of a natural timing when school starts again, and to potentially do another fee increase, that seems like that would be appropriate if we did this one now and that one in the fall maybe.
Yep.
And I'll-
yeah, and that will come up, we could do that with our brochure at the same time.
Perfect. Any other questions?
If this is already out there, then I guess I would go with what's 3%.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
And we have
agree
talked
entirely.
about, Julie and I have also talked about that with our brochure having to come out in November. We will be bringing the park and rec fees to you prior to November like we had in the past.
Okay.
Or at least it goes to the park board before that because it's published, so.
Wonderful.
You know,
Councilor Lehman.
maybe in the future, maybe we should like approve this before we print it and put it out in the public?
Yes, we just
That's
talked
what
about
she
that.
I think that is very clear.
Yeah.
Anything else?
We're late this year.
All right, is there anyone from the public who'd like to comment on fees? Anyone? Mr. Jordan?
Jordan Olson, 249 Mount Street, Mr. Mayor.
He knows the process. I'm just excited we got you up to the microphone all night here, Julie. This has been a miracle.
I just want to say it's a little disappointing that I have to pay $40 to build a fence.
Thank you. Anything else?
Low cost of good neighbors.
All right, I will entertain a motion to.
We got park dedication.
Sorry. I forgot the park dedication part. My bad.
We could just skip
Yeah.
that and go right in.
No, sorry. Park dedication part. Go, Jamie.
Okay. I will go through this so that it's best to understand as possible. In October, when we were looking, every year we've been thinking about or talking about looking at our park dedication fees, but with the development down and the number of land sales down over the last couple of years, we haven't had substantial information to be able to make any substantial changes to our recreation fees, so we hadn't done any type of a study until this year. I did do a survey of 16 metro communities to ask what their park dedication fees are and where we would fall in that. Just as a base to see where we start. And I have a copy of this if everybody would like to see a copy. Would you like a copy of this? I've made copies if you'd like to.
Yes, please.
This is just an overview of the communities that I sent out the surveys to, asking for what their residential, multifamily, and commercial industrial rates are as of 2012. And then we asked them questions of whether they were raising them, and I'll go through those questions at the end. But basically, current fees are as listed, and if you look at the very bottom in the red, Shakopee is over the average park dedication. Well, the average park dedication for residential, single-family residential, is about $3,800, $4,100 if you take out the bottom two, which is what I requested to take out the bottom two, because Fridley and New Brighton, as I've talked to their directors and their city officials, they're pretty much built out. They don't have any room to build anymore, so their development fees are very, very low. So we took out those two communities. So the average basically is around $4,000 for a single-family residential. Currently, Shakopee is at up here, $5,340 is what we do for a single-family residential. So we're about close to $1,200 over the average of these 16 communities. Now, these are the 16 in the major metro area that I've compared to. Looking at multifamily, the average is about $3,400. We are at $4,450, so we're about $1,000 over the average there. However, I didn't do populations of all these communities, and that does weigh into the differences and that sort of thing. I just basically went with what they charge right now. And then if we look at commercial industrial, you'll see a couple of communities do it different way. A couple of people do, like $100 per 1,000 square feet. So that's hard to calculate if you don't know what buildings you're actually doing. So when you look at the average at the bottom for commercial and industrial, they are separated out because some communities do have a separate commercial rate and a separate industrial rate. Many are like Shakopee, where they have just one rate for commercial and industrial. The averages down here do not include these 4 communities that do it per 1,000 square feet, because it's hard to compare that, so it takes in the account the other 12. So the average Shakopee right now for commercial is about $1,800 or almost $2,000 below the average for commercial, and about $1,000 or $900 below the industrial rate. So that was our basis of what we did when we looked at the overall park dedication fees. This is before we were tasked by City Council to look at any type of a senior housing. However, we did ask different questions. If you turn over on the back of that sheet, we asked different questions of what their formula was used. Do they have any special fee considerations for multifamily or senior developments? That's where we started to base off our recommendation that I'll touch on in a little bit with that. Is there a dedicated or planned use for park dedication fees? And most people do it like the city of Shakopee does, and where it's used to develop their parks. And that's per state code or state statute is what it needs to be used for. But many people, that's all they use to build their parks like Shakopee. Other communities do supplement their park dedication fund by their general fund or grants and such. That we've also applied for grants, but at this time, the city only really funds our park reserve by our park dedication fees. So once our park dedication fees run out, we don't have any future funding for development of any parks unless the city chooses other avenues of putting any revenue into that fund. And here you'll see that any supplemental fees that are put into for those projects by other communities are listed there. So donations, some levy supplements, grants, general fund. And then we asked the question too if any developers have ever requested a reduction in park dedication fees and if they've granted that. 7 out of the 9 that responded to this question, so a couple people didn't respond, 7 said no and 2 said yes, and those were One was a senior facility, which is Lakeville, and they went through a whole process of their developer coming in and asking for a reduction. So similar to ours. And then the other one was I don't have it specifically on here, and I don't know which community it was, and I can find that out for you, but there was one other one that did reduce, and I believe it might have been New Brighton, and that had to do with their build-out in their area that was available. And have you ever made park planning changes based on fee adjustments? And many of them said no, they stick with their fee schedule like we do. We bring this big spreadsheet to you during budget time, and we stick to that, and each year we move projects back that we don't have the funding for. So those are adjustments that we do make, but at the same time, during a year, unless something big comes on, we haven't really made any adjustments to those fees. So this is just an overview of what we went off of. So what I had brought forward and what's in your packet is the memo that we went to the park board with that kind of explained what staff's recommendation was. In each year, other years when we've looked at the fees in 2002 through 2006. So we haven't raised our fees from 2006 to today or lowered our fees either. And from 2002 to 2006, as you can see, they've gone up, and that was based on the development that was happening in the city, the value of the land that was happening. We did look at, and I had Mr. Svoboda from planning help me look at the recent land sales in the community. And at the time that we did this study back in October, there was really only one land sale that qualifies to be put into our formula as we've done it in other years. And that is one that the park board really wasn't very enthused about because it didn't feel like it was a very good representation of a land sale because it was between the Minnetonka and Sioux community and a private developer. So that was the only land sale that we had to compare with and put into our formula. But our formula has always been that we take that land sale, which in this case was actually $13.8 million for 112 acres. Divided by that, it ended up to be $123,000 per acre. We put that into our formula, dividing it by 25 units for single-family duplex residential. And these formulas go back to our ordinance that we have in our comp plan that we have. So I can try it. They're on the front as well, but I can try to explain them if we have questions. But we put it into our formula that we've used since 2002, dividing that by 25 units. We came up with 4,900. The multifamily, same thing. We divide that by 30 units per our formula that we have, 4,100. Basically, it was a decrease in those from our current fees of about 7%. Right now, our formula, as you see on the front for commercial and industrial, doesn't say specifically a formula. It's really based on, and it has been since 2002 to 2006 on the increase. It was the same percentage of increase for our commercial as we had for the single family and the multifamily residential. So in this case, however, though, I looked back at our comp plan to see what that had to say, and our comp plan clearly states that with our fees that we have set in 2007 and 2010 when our comp plan was approved, those fees will not sustain our build out to 2030 that we have planned. So our comp plan recommends that we either revamp our formula, that we look at other funding sources to put into the park reserve so we have enough funds in there to do our anticipated build out to 2030, or we raise our fees, especially with commercial industrial, because that was in our comp plan as being low, and then you can see our average as being low. So when I brought this forward to the park board, my original recommendation was to use our formula that we've used in the past and reduce our single family and multifamily residential by that 7%, but on the flip side, increase the industrial commercial by 7% per the recommendations of our comp plan and where we sit with that 16 city comparison that we did. Park board, however, did not feel that that was a good comparison because of the sale that it was, and they felt at this time, since we don't have substantial information to go off of for actual land sales and pricing at a realistic rate, they are requesting or recommending to you that we keep the residential and the multifamily rates as they have been since 2006, so do no adjustment to them. But they are recommending the raise in commercial based on the recommendation of the comp plan as well as a comparison. But like I said, the comparison of the 16 cities doesn't take into account population and that sort of thing. So the fees we're bringing forward in our fee schedule are $53.40 and $45.50, which is the same, no change in those. But the commercial industrial recommendation is to raise it to $7,470 per acre. So I can answer any questions on those three things before I get into the senior, if you have any questions.
Questions on this part? I'd say we just hold on to them until you get through the senior part.
Okay. So the last question that the last task that the city council put on us a few months ago when a development came in as a request for reduction of park dedication fees for senior living brought us back to this, and that was why we asked the question to these other communities if they do any reductions. The majority of communities don't do reductions. For senior, we do have two, Lakeville, and that's on the back of that sheet that I had. And those are actually specified out, I believe. Lakeville does $500 per bed, but their senior apartments are considered the same as a multifamily dwelling. So this is just assisted living. And then City of Chanhassen, actually independent living equals the multifamily, which is pretty consistent. But their care facilities that are less than 24/7 are a quarter of the multifamily rate. And the facilities that provide 24/7 care actually have no charge to them at this time. So when we were charged with looking at the use of a senior development and where that might fall within park dedication, and working with Mr. Thompson, we were advised that comparisons are, you can look at them, but we really need to look at the impact of what a senior facility would have on our community and be realistic about that. So we did some discussions at the staff level about what we feel that a senior facility would. We think that a senior housing independent living should stay the same as a multifamily rate as other communities are, because they do have an impact. They're active adults. However, we do see that a assisted living facility may have a little bit less of an impact on the community, because the residents usually are one per room versus a multifamily may have two or more per room. Many of them for instance, I don't want to say anything, memory care unit are typically confined to their building. They don't go out all that much, so therefore their impact on the area parks may be much more reduced. However, the patients do have family and friends that would be coming to the community that may use the parks. These care facilities hire a lot more staff that would be at the facility that would have impacts on the parks. So looking at the future of what the impacts of these facilities have on our parks isn't zero, because there are workers that come there, there's family and friends that visit. So the recommendation that we are bringing forward that we feel is reasonable is that the senior assisted living senior facility would be 3/4 of the multifamily rate. So it is a quarter reduction, but we do feel there still is an impact on our park facilities by these types of developments, as there is with family developments.
Mr. Lehman.
I think it should be the same as the multiple family apartment, because realistically, if it didn't come into Shakopee, the other use that may have been on that site could have paid a single family, a commercial, or a multiple. So I'm looking at it from the opposite direction
Yep.
here. I mean, the impact on the city's overall park development is a negative impact because they're paying a less of a rate.
Correct.
So, to me, I mean, you could have put other uses on that property that would have benefited the whole park system
Okay.
more positively.
Mhm.
So, I would just leave the assisted living at the same as the multiple family apartment rate.
I agree.
Okay. So we can strike out that different fee then for an assisted living rate.
Well, I don't think they have the impact on the park, so I do think a reduction in the fee is important to try and get some of these facilities, give them some sort of incentive to come here. And we have, obviously, in a few different ways, but This is specifically to the parks and the park, how it impacts, and I don't see it as having that much of an impact. Their residents having that much of an impact. So I think the 3/4 reduction from the multifamily would be adequate, and it's a good way to start.
All right. Counselor Clay, did you want to weigh in on that?
No.
All right, so we had 3 folks that wanted no additional tier there. Hands? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, maybe, probably the best way to do this would be, once you're done with the public hearing, somebody can move the ordinance, second it, and then if anybody wants to change what's on there, you could make the motion and see if it passes at that time. That way you'll know what's actually adopted.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, so we will see, is there anybody else in the public who would like to speak?
Is there any
Before
more
we close the
questions
public
on,
hearing?
is there any more questions on the other park dedication fees?
I think there are going to be a lot of questions, but that'll be in discussion.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Correct, Mr. Thompson?
Mhm.
Anyone else? We're going to close the public hearing. All right, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Counselor Sherman, do we have a second? Second by Counselor Lehman.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, so under Mr. Thompson's direction, we'll entertain a motion for adopting, do we need to adopt one at a time, or what's the best way to handle this?
Mr. Mayor, no, the requested action is to offer ordinance number 863, 4th series for adoption.
Okay. Counselor Lehman.
Offer 863, ordinance 863, 4 series with adoption with the modification to park dedication fees, striking multiple senior assisted living facilities per unit pricing and lumping it into the multiple family apartment.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Counselor Sherman. All right, discussion. Let's start with the original fee schedule that Ms. Linehan discussed. Are there any further questions on that? Any other issues with that? Okay.
Oh, she got by easy.
All right, then non-park dedication, park and rec fees. Anything with that we need to discuss? All right, park dedication fees. Who would like to begin? Councilor Clay.
I would have liked to have found out from the cities that we were using for comparisons, what or how much the money from the budget went into, general fund went into Parks and Rec as opposed to their dedication fees.
I have the individual cities that filled out the survey, so,
Yeah.
and the ones that said that they had general fund going to it, I can contact them and find out that.
I was just wondering what's the best way to represent that number? Because we're talking about cities of varying size and populations, and maybe as a percentage of the total park.
We could take a look at their park budget. We could take a look at the revenue sources that come in and apply against that overall park budget and determine, one, do they even have a park dedication fee? And if so, in a plan, do they have a percentage or an expectation of how much that covers? But I think more significantly, is that the only revenue source they have, or is the revenue source that primarily funds their parks the general tax levy?
Yeah, and if we could express that as a percentage of the park budget,
Mm-hmm.
I think would be most
I think so.
comparable.
Well, and will the fee study include park dedication?
Yes, we are gonna talk about that.
So we'd have like 75% is park dedication fees, 20% is transfer from the general fund, and 5% is
Right, and
hot
what's
dog sales
interesting,
or
I think,
something.
as I looked at this issue a little more, it's interesting is what people may have budgeted, what has happened historically actual. You can get very differing perspectives. So we'd want to look at that a little.
Councilor Lehman?
Well, I think you're gonna have to look at what their park, development plan
Mm-hmm.
is and how that's
Exactly.
allocated, because it might be allocated kinda like our road projects lately. 2 million here, small amount here, a lot over here, and very little over here. So it's not consistent. And if you find one that happens to be consistent year to year to year to year, it's gonna be a lot easier to use as a template.
But yes, we can definitely tap into, do they have a defined park plan like Shakopee has? Or is it just based on as needed?
Yep, and then, I'd like to see our surrounding Prior Lake and Chaska on this list.
Mm.
Be curious to know that information.
So can I ask a question of council? Why do we care?
They didn't respond.
They didn't respond at all.
Thank you. Why do we, I mean, we need to be competitive with other cities. We need to make sure that we're within whatever our ballpark is, but why do we care what other cities are? We have, everything is different from
Because-
city to city, and we,
I'll answer that for you.
well, let me finish first. And we need to be competitive, which this pretty much shows that we're in the right area for things. But the way we handle things is completely different than the way everybody else handles them. So don't need staff putting a lot more time into these kinds of numbers. I want to make sure that it works for us, for where we as a body are directing people to go. So, Councilor Lehman?
Well, if I don't like Shakopee's policies, but I like the location, the closest competitor is Chaska and Prior Lake for me to move to. So, from the standpoint of our citizen base, if they like to be in this area and don't like what we're doing, that's where they're gonna go, and that's where they're gonna compete with.
Are you saying for houses or for businesses or jobs, or what are you saying?
Both. If I wanted to move my house but still wanted to be in the southwest area close to Shakopee, I'm not gonna be looking in Woodbury or Lakeville or Emerald Grove Heights or Maple Grove as on this list. I'm gonna be looking at Prior Lake, Shakopee, Savage, maybe a little west of here, Carver, to stay close to the Shakopee area.
All right,
If I wanted to stay close to Shakopee.
got it. Councilor Sherman?
But, I guess with park dedication fees, these are developer-paid fees that are just upon the development of the community. So it's more related to our economic development than an individual person's decision.
No, because we're asking these cities that we talked about what portion of their general levy dollars are they dedicating to their park portion,
Yeah, and what I'm saying is I don't care.
which is above and beyond
Right.
just park dedication and development dollars. This is general tax dollars.
Councilor Whiting?
I agree with you. I think it's different for each city, and so by asking these other cities, we're not getting an apples to apples comparison. We have our needs for what we've decided how we want to develop our parks. So that's why we base our fees the way we do. A person's gonna buy a house here is not gonna look at the park dedication fees. They're gonna look at schools and other aspects of why they wanna build here. That's all part of the developer. Well, my big concern here is that we're raising the commercial industrial, and that's where it's gonna affect the economic development portion, because they are looking at all those fees. Every time their little fee goes up, they're going, well, the Shakopee's gonna cost too much. So that is a concern of mine. I'd rather have those people in the city paying the taxes, and then we can look at maybe moving, once we get some more of that in our general fund, moving some of that to parks and lowering the commercial industrial fee, because that's, I think, where we're gonna see the biggest advantage by having that lower fee.
Exactly. Julie?
Get gold
so-
star microphone attendance
Well
tonight.
played. The fee study, what will it tell us? Will it tell us where we need to be? Will it tell us where our strengths, weaknesses are? What information will we get from it? And should we wait to make any decision changing our park dedication fee until after we have that information?
You certainly could, because then you're not
Could or should?
putting that cart before the horse. If you make a change now, it does somewhat restrict, I guess, that freedom to make a decision down the road when you're only looking at several months.
Thank you. Councilor Lehman?
We already published the park fees.
No, park dead is
Park
different
dedication's not.
category.
Oh, but in the whole document that's on a table before us, we.
Right, in the summary ordinance, but yes. After this is approved tonight, it then becomes effective as of January 9th.
Right, so we can't really not approve the changes in park fees that are already published.
No,
Well, the park
no.
fees have been published, but the park dedication is a separate thing. It hasn't
Correct.
been. That's all I'm talking about is the park dedication
Right.
portion of it.
Because we would change any adjustments that were made tonight by council.
All right. Councilor Whiting.
I think it appropriate, I would make a motion to table the park dedication fees portion of ordinance 863 for fourth series until we have a Springstead study. Is that appropriate?
Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Mayor, I don't think table would be what you want. What I think what's on the table right now is what staff has recommended, with the deletion of the multiple senior assisted living facility. That's not in the motion that's on the floor. So, I think what you'd want to do is amend the motion that's on the floor to keep the commercial industrial as is. And see if that passes. Until, if you want to say until the Springstead study's completed.
Is that what you're going for, Councilor Whiting?
Yes.
Nice. Yeah, all right.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make my motion, withdraw my first motion and make the motion to not change the commercial industrial portion of the park dedication fees from the previous.
Do we want
We
to withdraw it
amending
or
that?
just amend it?
This is amendment to the main motion.
Correct.
Amended, yeah.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Clay. Any discussion on the amendment? Councilor Lehman?
Based on the information that was given to us, even by adjusting it, it's still lower than everybody around us, so I don't know why we would expect the fee study to show any different. I mean, we're still more competitive than most on this list for the commercial industrial portion of it, even at the new recommendations from the staff. Mr. Leak, I think, is his
Mr. Leak?
hand up.
Thank you.
At the risk of being devil's advocate, I certainly understand and appreciate where we are with respect to other communities and the methodology we have to use for park dedication. But looking at it from an economic development perspective, we do have 2 or 3 prospects that we're looking at in various areas of the city that will result in the need to subdivide land. They currently understand what the park dedication fee is. As of today, this will have a pretty significant impact if it's raised on what their park dedication fee would be at subdivision in those 3 areas. That may be something that you want to take into account and defer until you see what the study suggests about those fees. You may want to, if it suggests raising it anyway, bite the bullet at that point and raise them. But it would have a kind of negative impact, or at least result in requests to you to waive or modify the fees for the plats that may come forward in the near future.
Thank you, Mr. Leak. Any further discussion on the amendment? Councilor Clay.
Comment, I guess. Included in that amendment is the residential portion of this, correct? And there was a comment made earlier that, the developers pay the park dedication fees, and that's not entirely accurate. They temporarily pay them, but recoup that money when they sell the lots. So, and which is why I was curious about what percentage or what other cities are, how much of their park fees are coming from the general fund, which is picked up by taxes, property taxes and everybody. If we have a high park dedication fee and subsequently other lower taxes because we're not funding the rest of it otherwise, what happens is that the developers have to spend more money and they need to sell their lots for another, $500 or $600, $700 compared to maybe a similar lot in the next city. With them understanding, but the buyer's never thinking about the fact that, okay, I'm getting a lot $500 cheaper, but I'm paying higher taxes. For the years and years and years after I bought this lot.
Mhm.
So, eventually it's, you know, the taxpayers that are footing the bill. It's just how they're doing it.
Right.
That was
Councilor
just a
Lehman?
comment.
Well, my arching concern is you have business come to Shakopee, you give them tax abatement, you lower their park dedication fees, and all of this at some point falls on the general taxpayer, the other general taxpayers. So, at some point, then you can't fund your parks, so now you're gonna put a recreation tax in there on the general taxpayer on top of it. The argument can be made you can't fund your parks because you keep lowering your rates for everybody and giving tax-free status to folks that are coming here. So, at some point, you're gonna run out of people that are gonna have the wherewithal to fund all this, when there's only a handful paying for it and a handful receiving for free. So,
I don't understand what you're saying.
comes down to an equity issue. Well, me as a taxpayer, you know, if I'm gonna subsidize a business that comes here by offering tax abatement, and then turn around and waive their park dedication fees or lower their park dedication fees, at some point, I would have to say as a taxpayer that this is costing me too much to have them here. It's just not economically makes sense. So I think we need to be careful of that.
But we're not talking about lowering park dedication or reducing park dedication for anybody right now. That's not what we're talking about at all.
I think the motion on the table right now is to not take the recommendation of the park board and to keep it as it is and not raise it.
So that's not, that's keeping it as is, that's not lowering it.
Right. So it's not.
Definition of lowering.
I guess if we're working at,
Well,
Councilor
lowering it
Lehman
from-
just became a Minnesota State legislator.
It's lowering it from what the recommendation is.
And it depends on what is.
Is definition, uh-oh. All right, we don't need to go down that.
Okay.
All right, so the amendment to the motion, we're still in discussion. Any other further discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes 4-1. All right, and so the item, let me get back to it here. Ordinance number 863, 4 series is still on the
I'm
floor.
gonna withdraw that motion or offer an amendment to that motion. To leave the residential as is also, pending the outcome of the Springstead's study.
That's already in the ocean.
Okay.
That's already.
So, the multiple family is gonna stay the same too? Yes. Okay, all right, then no amendment is needed.
Okay, any other further discussion on the fees? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, thank you everyone for that. We are gonna move, before we go to the EDA, we are gonna move to 10F1. Special City Council meeting dates.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We took this out of order because the adjournment on the EDA agenda, which would be next, is dependent upon what your decision is. Now, in the packet, there is a recommendation that we were gonna consider having you do 2 special meetings, one for next Tuesday at 8 p.m. That was going to include a discussion of possible incentives for an economic development prospect that's coming to town. We've determined recently that they are not at a position where we're ready to bring that to you, and so it didn't make sense for us to have that meeting, which would then be to possibly consider call for a public hearing Monday night, February 4th. There is still, however, a need to meet as a city council to talk about the budgeted economic development coordinator position, which is budgeted to start March 1st. The EDAC has a very strong interest in participating in that discussion and would like to be part of that. The EDAC would normally meet the next night, Wednesday, the 16th at 6 p.m. If we're not going to be talking about the economic development prospect coming to town, if you're willing to have a special meeting, perhaps it could be a joint meeting Our recommendation would be, if you're gonna do that, to perhaps do that on Wednesday, the 16th at 7 PM, which would give then the EDAC an opportunity to meet for an hour before that, and they can talk about their other business and their preferences or their rationale for what they want to talk about with the position.
Yep.
So that was the first one. You want to talk about that first?
Yeah, let's. Why do we have a lot on the meeting for the 22nd? Is this something that needs to be an entire meeting by itself, or can we do this on the 22nd?
The EDA, or excuse me, the Economic Development Coordinator discussion,
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a reason you couldn't delay it until the 22nd.
Can we invite the EDAC to that meeting?
Sure.
That's because pulling the abatement discussion off of this meeting. Councilor Sherman?
That would also just allow the EDAC to have a separate discussion about it prior to involving us
They will
as
still
well.
meet on the 16th next
Right.
week, so that would give them a
Be a
full
recommendation
evening
as
to
an agenda
discuss.
item.
Sure.
Any issue with that? Not having another meeting? Okay.
All right. Then the other meeting was recommended for Monday night, February 4th. That was again to hold the public hearing. That would not be called for, and therefore no necessity to meet then. However, there is also a recommendation that would use the other part of that meeting to talk about what will be the final form of the RFP for recycling and garbage collection. However, in speaking with the consultant, if you're not gonna have anything else to talk about that night, we can defer that until the following night, February 5th. So, based on that, if you're okay with it, there's no need to have a special meeting at either of those nights.
Perfect. Councilor Lehman?
Have we got any information back on the proposal?
Staff today sent their comments in on what was 60 pages of that document. That needs to be reviewed by the city attorney, which will be coming up later.
Oops.
So, again, we anticipate this will be ready to come to you on February 5th.
Any other questions?
Is that a recommendation at that point?
There will be a series of recommendations. Once it gets into a final form, we'll go through the rationale as far as why we're doing that, but there are quite a number of components to be considered on that, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable with it before we send that out for proposals.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank
We'll
you.
move on. Thank you, sir. We will move to item number 8, recess for Economic Development Authority meeting. Have a motion to recess for Economic Development?
So move.
Councilor Whiting, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Sherman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We are in recess at 8:40. President Clay.
Thank you, Mayor. Call the meeting of the Economic Development Authority for January 8th, 2013 to order. Ms. Wickman, if you would please make note of the roll, I would appreciate it. Limited agenda tonight, just have approval of the minutes. If I could get a motion to approve the agenda, Mr. Mr. Whiting,
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
seconded by Sherman. Discussion?
It's your name, right?
Yeah. I don't. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hebke Jr.
Tabke Jr. Then we have item number 3, approval of the EDA minutes for December 18th, 2012. Mr. Whiting.
I'll move
Motion
to,
seconded by Mr. Lehman. I just jumped right over you there.
we're good.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Lehman?
Mr. President, motion to adjourn to Tuesday, January 15th.
Okay.
Actually, we need the 22nd now
22nd.
that we're not meeting
22nd.
next week.
January
We have
22nd.
a motion to adjourn to Tuesday,
22nd.
January 22nd.
Correct.
Seconded by
Second.
Mr.
Whoever I am.
Tabke.
What's your face?
Mr. Whiting.
Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
All right, we reconvene at 8:41.
That's fine.
All right, moving on, we'll skip back over to item 11, councilmember reports. Councilor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In end of December, I met with the Chamber Visitors Bureau. They have 7 new board members. Chuck Berg from Riverside Computers, Jim Conway from Jaspers, Moriarty, and Wahlberg, Jane Ament from BASF, Todd Larkin from Valley Fair, Wade Johnson from Outland Builders, Mary Fleming from Canterbury, and Bruce Christman from, is an associate member. They, again, chose to be members of the Chamber of Commerce, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and are moving forward with that ability, utilizing their resources. There was some questions about how the city is moving forward with our sign policy, and told them that that would be several months, and probably maybe by this spring or later. I don't know how we're moving ahead, Mr. Leek, if you have any guidance for him there.
I and Ms. Klima have put together a work plan, which currently we expect to provide information to the EDAC and the Planning Commission, and of course we'll copy the Chamber of Commerce because of their role in this in February to begin that discussion.
Okay. All right, and then lastly, just some questions about how the Chamber and some of their members can be part of the famous flower pots we have down here. So I'm working with staff and working to get some of that information back.
Famous flower pots.
Now famous flower pots.
Infamous flower pots.
Councilor Clay.
Thank you. The Shakopee Public Utilities Commission met yesterday. Before I forget, I want to mention that the utility crews are now going out and doing some tree trimming of any trees, branches, things that might be getting into the way of overhead power lines. So if any residents have an issue or have a tree where it looks like it's going to be compromising a power line in your yard or your property or nearby, please feel free to give the utility a call and let them know so they can come out and take care of that.
How much does that cost?
That's free,
Free.
as long as it's clearing off and making the power line, overhead power line safe. There's no charge to residents for that. The Christmas Day, there was a power outage of about 956 customers, half of which the power was restored in an hour, the other half took about 3 to 3.5 hours, caused by a failure in an underground switching mechanism. There's cables and then there's elbows that the cables connect to go into the switch. The elbow failed. They're not quite sure why, because when they fail, they pretty much just melt. So it's pretty hard to study them to see what happened. But they do thermal imaging scans of all of these switches on a regular basis, and in fact the switch had just been scanned a few months back, and it was okay at that testing. So this makes it doubly curious as to why it chose Christmas Day to melt.
What a great day to melt.
Yeah.
Christmas lights
Yeah.
on one circuit.
From the water side, the static level of all of our wells has pretty much returned to their typical January levels, regardless of the large amount of water pumpage that took place this hot summer. They're back to the levels that they basically have been at for the last 5 years or more. So we seem to be not suffering as far as the supply of our water at our well points. That's it.
Can I ask a question about, did they have any discussions about, Mr. McNeil and I met with SPUC Board on Monday.
Yes, to try to figure out a better way to get information out.
Yeah.
There was a brief discussion on that, but it still appears to be a work in progress.
Okay. Councilor Lehman.
I was on vacation, I don't have a report.
Councilor Sherman.
The transit groups have been not active. The Suburban Transit Group gets back together on Monday, this coming Monday, the 14th, for a legislative breakfast and board meeting. And the Scott County Transit hasn't met since the end of November. They'll be meeting again the end of January. If I am unable to attend the legislative breakfast. Mr. Leek, are you attending the breakfast on the 14th?
I am planning to attend it.
Okay,
We
so
have
if
an
anyone
STA
would-
meeting following
If anyone
anyway.
would like to attend that in my place, it is 8:30 on Monday, the 14th. Just let me know and I can send you the details. It's a breakfast where the Suburban Transit Group is meeting with legislators to talk about this session's agenda.
What are they
So they'll
serving?
present information. It's at the Kelly Inn.
It's a
So,
Bloody Mary breakfast.
so just let me know if you would like to attend. I can send the details.
And then, on that same note, Scale is having legislative breakfast, legislative meeting, this Friday, and all of our new legislators will be there. And that's the biggest thing going on with me right now. Any other business other than 12A, which was added for the downtown fire station closed meeting? All right, I'll entertain a motion to, go into closed session.
For the purpose of discussing real estate offer.
Relating to the downtown fire station.
Councilor Lehman?
Make a motion to go into closed session for discussions of retail offer negotiations with the downtown fire station.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.